Hey guys, welcome to my channel. So today I'm going to be starting a new series which is focused on frequently and commonly asked questions that I get as a guitar teacher from students and from people looking to upgrade their chops on the guitar. Now there's a lot of different advice out there and it's pretty tough if you're moving between channels and videos on YouTube to get reliable information, but what I focus on in particular are rock and metal players and giving them the advice that's both worked for me and that's been battle tested in my teaching that I've seen be effective and work on other people as well. So I'm kind of known down here in Australia as the metal guy and the metal teacher, and that's what I really specialize in, as well as all the other stuff as well, but that's what I'm going to focus on in today's video. And I'm going to answer two main questions. The first question that I get a lot is, do I need to learn music theory? And the second question is, what scales do I actually need to learn and study to become a better player on the guitar? So let's dive in. All right, guys. So the first question I'm going to address today, do I need to learn music theory? Now, as with all of my answers, I will start with this. It 100% depends upon your goals as a musician and a guitarist, but I think that every guitarist should have at least some basic knowledge of music theory and how all this stuff works on the fretboard. I don't know everything. I don't claim to. I don't proclaim myself as some kind of music theory nut or professor or anything like that. I'm just a guy who loves playing guitar and a guy who loves helping other people achieve their goals. I often don't like those sorts of people anyway, to be perfectly honest, and you may not either. Those sort of elitist types or the guys that are really black and white with things and really into structure and rules and rigidity. I had some teachers like this in the past. They were more classical teachers and I never really vibed with them and I didn't get as much results with them. I'm more of a creative person, and when I actually go and study creatives, what surprises me a lot of the time is they don't really know that much in terms of music theory. So just be careful of the elitist and the elitist mindset out there. It's really prevalent, especially among some really famous older YouTubers out there. You can probably guess who I'm talking about, but I really don't like any form of elitism, superiority, ego, or pretentiousness with music and the guitar. It's just not my thing, and I tend to swat it away and don't want that around me as a player. So I think this thing is an absolutely amazing instrument, and if it calls on us to work on our relationship with it, absolutely amazing. We're freaking lucky if it does. So park that ego, just BS, and just know that I'm not going to go into any of that with you today. But saying all of this, music theory and learning it will give you more options, and that's what it's about. It's something I think that is important, particularly if you are creative and are more right-brained like I am. If I'm working on riffs, songs, solos, and it's not flowing, it can help me sometimes really look at what I can use and what other options I have available in terms of theory that I can then go and sort of apply or try to see if it can get me unstuck and get me moving again. But I really stress this, music is emotional. You have to be in feeling, so you can't have music theory become one of those things that gets you stuck in your head and into what I call your left brain or your analytical brain. It's a simple tool that you should be able to pick up and put down, not something that dominates and controls you or your choices on the instrument. That should be led by emotion and by feeling. So there's plenty of examples of artists and guitarists who know basically no theory and have had very successful careers. It's because they are working in the creative side of their brain, not the analytical part of the brain. And I really want to stress that today because it's not spoken about very much in the guitar community. I've also met plenty of theory nuts on the other side who are absolutely terrible creatives and couldn't write a riff or do anything creative or cool on the guitar to save their life. They might be able to emulate what other people are doing and be amazing technicians, but they can't create. So yes, it does depend on your goals, but you should in the very least learn some scales, understand where they come from, learn some arpeggios and where they come from, and understand keys and chords and have the basics down between rhythm and lead playing so that you can jam and improvise, whether that's just with backing tracks, cool, or whether it's with other musicians, even better. That's my take on it. If you want to take it further than that, it's up to you, and it circles back to what I spoke about around your individual goals as a player. I love to explore concepts in music theory personally to get new sounds and ideas. They will give me different perspectives and inspire me to create with them and try different things and get me outside of my comfort zone. So let's get stuck into some practical stuff here. That's the answer to the question, but the starting point of all music theory is learning the major scale. So there are simple formulas or scales that help show the distance between the notes, which are called steps, and we are going to apply that. So I'm going to load it up on the screen now. The major scale has the following step formula: whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Now, at the moment, that may not make much sense. So let's break it down. So a whole step is 2 frets on the guitar. If we start on the low E and we jump up to the 2nd fret, then that's a whole step. If we take a half step, it's half of that, which is just 1 fret. So E to F, or the 1st fret from the open fret, is a half step. And this applies anywhere. So if we start on the 5th fret and we go up 2 frets, that's a whole step. We go up 1 fret, that's a half step. Okay, so now we can go back to our formula, which was whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. And we can actually map out a major scale on the guitar. So for simplicity, let's start from the open E. So we need a whole step next, which puts us on the F sharp, the 2nd fret. Another whole step, which puts us on G sharp. Then a half step. A. We now need another whole step, puts us on the 7th fret, or the B. Then we need another whole step, which puts us on C sharp. And then we need another whole step, which puts us on D sharp, or the 11th fret. And then we need a half step to come back to an E. So you can actually hear the scale. It's a very familiar sound when you play this in sequence. We get this. This is the E major scale because we started on E and we finished on E. That's the giveaway to figure out what note it corresponds to. So now what we're going to do is we're going to move this up to the 12th fret and we're going to look at a single octave. And it looks like this. So we're going to go 12. I'm going to talk in frets here. We're going to go 12, 14, 16, 12, 14, 16, then 13, 14. And this gives us a single octave of the E major scale in the 1st position, or in the 12th position, I should say. So this is really the starting point of all music theory, because what we then do when we're looking at exotic scales or different scales, arpeggios, modes, is we're always referencing back to the major scale and we're manipulating it in some way, shape, or form. So that's why you have to start studying the major scale if you're learning music theory. It's completely different to how we're taught and how we learn on the guitar, which is really to start with the pentatonic scale and then kind of venture off from there. You know, maybe learn the minor scale, maybe learn the blues scale, maybe learn some other cool notes, some cool licks. But it's a different perspective when we're studying music theory. And I like things like this when I'm studying theory because, like I said before, they give me a different perspective. They allow me to enter into the instrument from a different entry or exit point, like I'm on a freeway, okay? I'm still entering the same kind of fretboard, but I'm starting from a different location and often exiting from a different location. So it changes my perspective. Now, to alleviate some fears here, that wasn't that hard, right? And it didn't stifle your creativity. Those are usually the 2 sort of biggest fears and concerns that people have is, number 1, music theory is hard. Number 2, it can stifle your creativity. Both of them are BS. Both of them are things that I actually used to believe when I was more focused on being an artist than I am now as a teacher. But it's actually changed me a lot learning this stuff, and it just gives me more options, and that's what I want to stress to you. So that answers the first question of today's video, which is, do I need to learn music theory? Okay, so every metal or rock guitarist should be wrapped around at least 4 scales, and very bare minimum is doing them in a single position on the guitar. Now, I teach my students over time these scales all over the neck. And if you want to go deeper on this stuff, I have a free 7-day metal guitar bootcamp where I open up a bit more on this stuff, but I'm also working on a course which will deep dive into this style of content in 6 months, where you can really get to know the guitar and improve yourself as a player, both in terms of rhythm and lead as a metal guy or girl. So I believe every metal guitarist should know 4 scales and should know them in the first position, or what we refer to in guitar as the box position. So these scales are number 1, the pentatonic, number 2, the blues, number 3, the minor scale or the Aeolian, and number 4 is the harmonic minor. Each of these scales has a different character or sound to it, and this is where I find the music theory part interesting personally. I'm not a guy who likes to just fill my mind with information. I get really bored with it. I'm a practical person. You might be too. That's cool. So I want to understand what I can do with the scales and their nature so that I can use them in practice and maybe create something out of it in some way, shape, or form. So let's look at these scales. Now, just keep in mind, I'm not going to go too heavily into the theory of each of these scales today, and I'll keep it brief and mostly show you the scales on the board for you to learn in a more practical manner. I'm going to start with the minor scale, and there's a reason why, even though it's a little unconventional on the guitar to start with the minor scale. But in terms of music theory, what we're going to do to get the minor scale is manipulate the major scale and then arrive at it. Why? Because we take the major scale and we manipulate it to actually get the minor scale. The minor scale is simply the major scale, but with a flattened third, a flattened sixth, and a flattened seventh. Let's compare these two scales over a single octave. Before, we had the major scale up here, which went like this. Now, I'm going to reference these notes in terms of intervals of just the number that we're playing within the overall context of the scale. There's 7 notes, and then we end again on the 8th note, which is the E. So I can go like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then I'm 8 or 1 again, okay? So I have 8 notes there. Now, what we're going to do is manipulate these. So I said before, the minor scale is the major scale with a flattened third. So let's count up and let's find our third. So that note, I need to flatten or move down 1 fret. So I get this, okay? A minor third in there. And if I keep going back to the major scale now, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Remember I said it had a flattened 6 as well, so I need to flatten that note. Here I'm going to move it down 1 fret, and it also had a flat 7. So in the major scale, let's go back to it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I need to flatten this note. So I need to move it down. Okay, so when I do this, I get the minor scale. Remember, flatten 3, flatten 6, flatten 7. 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, and then I'm back to 8. So this gives me my minor scale. That's a single octave there. And if I want to learn it in its entirety in this 12th position, and then if I come down, I get that as my minor scale. So this is the first of the 4 scales that I think every metal guitarist should know. This is used in countless metal songs by lead guitarists, and it's just one of those ones that you have to be wrapped around. A great band that used this scale very well, in my opinion, is Opeth. I love listening to the lead guitar in Opeth because it's really great utilization of the minor scale. Okay, so let's move on to our next scale here. Our next scale is the pentatonic. Now, most of you will probably already know it. So it's seen as the sort of starting point of lead guitar, and it's where we all start when we're learning lead guitar because it's simple, it's basic, and it's where the history of guitar kind of started as well. If the further you go back in time, the more use of the pentatonic, but it's still around today, and it's important that you know it and you're wrapped around it. What, in terms of the theory, we need to look at and understand is the pentatonic is a 5-note scale. We're taking and sort of cherry picking a couple of notes out of the minor scale to get this pentatonic scale. So what we're doing from the minor scale is we're taking the 1st, the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, and the 7th. So if we play that, right, we had the minor scale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8. With the pentatonic, we're taking the 1, the 3, the 4, the 5, the 7, and then we're back to the 8 here. So that's that's it over a single octave. If we extend it at the 12th position, we get that. Okay, so now we have two scales that are useful for metal. We've got the minor, we've got the pentatonic. Excellent. So now let's move on to our third scale, which every metalhead needs to know, which is the blues scale. This is something that I'm seeing get lost a little bit in the last sort of maybe 15 years of playing is metal guitarists aren't really learning the blues anymore. And it makes me a bit sad because I'm such a big Dimebag Darrell guy and I think everyone really needs the strong underpinning of the blues because it's what gives a sensational feel on the guitar. And you can tell when a guitarist has studied the blues versus one who hasn't. And a lot of the metalcore guys, I feel, aren't well rooted in the blues enough. What we need to do now is take our pentatonic scale and we're going to add one extra note to it. So our pentatonic, remember we were cherry picking from the minor scale, had the first, the third, the fourth, the fifth, and the seventh. And then we were back to the eighth. So all we do for the blues is we add a flat 5. So we go 1, 3, 4, flat 5, 5, 7, and then we're back home at 1 or the 8, okay, the octaves. So we get this cool kind of little chromatic thing here on the A string or the 5th string, 12, 13, 14. Now if we learn this in its entirety at this box position, we get this absolutely awesome scale, and it's one that Dimebag Darrell used a lot, but pretty much every lead guitarist worth his salt will reference this scale at some point, so it's very important that you know it and you're wrapped around it and that you do recognize it. All right, so let's move on to the last scale, and I've saved my personal favorite here for last, the harmonic minor scale. So I love this scale. It's probably my favorite sound in all of music except for maybe a major 7 arpeggio, but I'm not going to get too nerdy today. This scale is used a lot by Malmsteen. He is the most famous for it by far, but Dimebag Darrell used it at times, and you're going to find it actually in a lot of Metallica songs, more in the rhythm guitar, a little bit in the lead guitar, but there's always a tinge to this harmonic minor sound in a lot of metal, so we need to understand this scale. So we need to go back to the minor scale first off, so just a reference here. Remember, 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, a flat 7, and then an 8. Now, when I'm referencing those notes, I'm referencing the difference between the major scale. On the other scales, I'm not doing that as much. I'm more referencing the minor as the reference. But we need to go back to that for this because what we're going to do is add or change one note, which is the 7th. So we had this D here, which is a flat 7, right? And if we go back to the major scale, it actually had a D sharp. This note, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So the harmonic minor is the minor scale, which had a flat 3, a flat 6, but it keeps a natural 7 from the major scale. So we actually just take that D, if we're thinking in terms of the minor scale, and we just push it up 1 fret. Is how I think about it. So I get that really spicy, exotic sound, often referred to as like an Egyptian sound, and it's used in pretty much every movie that's based in the desert. Creeping Death by Metallica is a really, really sort of obvious example of this being used in metal music. Now, if I extend this out, I get a really cool sound at the 12th position. And this is one of my favorite sounds in all of music, and it's a scale that you have to know if you want to be serious about lead guitar and you want to be extending out, but it's a little bit more technically difficult, okay? So there's some challenges that are raised on the left hand with this, and remember this is a process. So at the moment you're on YouTube with me, you need structure if you want to get results, and you need to be doing the guitar for a long period of time and studying things for a long period of time, not just hopping between videos. So what I've done is I've created a playlist playlist, and I'll be adding to this playlist over time. And I'm going to load it up at the end of this, and I want you to jump through the playlist and study some of these frequently asked questions that I get, because it's going to knock out a whole lot of confusion and sort of give you a lot of clarity on the direction that you need to take on the guitar. All right, but that should answer a lot of those concerns or questions around music theory and then what scales do I need to learn. We've got 4 scales that are essential for metal guitarists to start with, and yes, we do want to have some basic understanding of music theory. So there you have it, guys. Now I've got another video that I want you to watch after this, which I've made to address the common mistakes that I see players make with their practice routines. So I want you to jump in and watch that, and I'll see you in that video.